guys, and welcome back to her Revision Podcast, the podcast for women who are rewriting the stories that they tell themselves and that the world tells them. And we are back with another episode. Last week, we actually talked about inner child wounds and basically how so many of the struggles that we face today, if not treated carefully and with proper healing, how some of the struggles that we had today actually may one be from our childhood and things that we experienced as a kid. And I actually want to take that a step further, because not only is it possible to still be dealing with things as a child, but once you actually recognize your wounds and you're able to see, the things that you may have been carrying with yourself, you also have to ask yourself, what identity did I build to survive this? Because you never really truly realize that you build an identity based off of your wounds. And then it gets embedded in you. And now with every situation, with every interaction, with every relationship, you've become this person. And honestly, the truth is we all have made ourselves into something. And I'll break it down a step further and I'll say, maybe like me, and this is my identity that I had placed on myself, I became the strong one. The one that could handle it all, the one that didn't need anybody's help with anything because I can do it. I got it. I've always had to have it. I got myself, right? Maybe you became the people pleaser, the one that placed their value in never wanting to disappoint somebody. And honestly, y'all, I might have had a few identities because it's also been a Jasmine thing. Maybe you became the overachiever, the one that tied their worth to what they could accomplish and the things that made them feel special, quote unquote, right? But one of the things that I had to realize and what you may need to actually open yourself up to see is that if you built your identity off of wounds that went unhealed as a child, though that same identity can also break you. It can cause a lot of conflict in your life. It can cause you to have so many situations arise that are just not conducive to your growth, especially if it goes unchecked. So let's get into that. Let's get into those identities and what you may have made yourself into unknowingly, right? So let's be real. As a kid, we were just trying to survive, or we just experienced life based on whatever environment we grew up in. And within that survival, or within that, that childhood experience, we became the version of ourselves that made sense at that time. And we never really shook away from it. We never became, something different. We operated within that identity. And I had to do some research on this just so I can break it down more. If love ever was conditional, and these are all, of course, things that went unnoticed in your life. So if love ever felt conditional, meaning that you lived and you were loved based on the things that you could do for others or the things that you did for yourself, whatever the case may be, you in turn may have built an entire identity on overachieving, on being the best of the best, proving yourself to make sure that you are always winning. And if you weren't winning internally, that meant you were failing. Internally, that meant that you wouldn't receive the love or the care that you deserved, that you weren't enough if you weren't being productive, right? So now you're the person that feels like she needs 5 degrees. She needs to be the highest income earner in the place. The woman that has it all, she feels like she needs to have the house, the car, the money, the clothes. She needs to one up everybody because that's where she places her value. If you had a childhood where people were unpredictable, you became the peacemaker. You really didn't know the temperament of others. So in turn, to make sure that there was no conflict, or you placed the idea of conflict, meaning something was unsafe, in your mind, keeping the peace meant love. It meant staying within that comfort bubble, right? That meant that you also may have avoided confrontation. You probably didn't speak your mind. You couldn't have an opinion because you didn't know how somebody was going to react to your voice or what you had to say. And you probably tiptoed around people's emotions for fear that you may set them off or make them feel some type of way. Or you may have felt like If I say what I have to say, or if I say what's on my heart, then I'll be ridiculed or I'll be misunderstood. So in turn, you became the peacemaker. I'm just going to suppress how I feel. I'm not going to say anything because I don't want to rock the boat. That became your identity, right? If you were constantly let down, your expectations were never met, or you felt like people didn't come through for you the way that they said that they would, you probably became the independent one, the one that had to do it all by yourself. You didn't rely on anybody because you felt like you couldn't, and you never asked for help. You probably, like me, have prided yourself on being able to handle it all alone, having your back, putting yourself through school, taking care of all your bills on your own, never asking anybody for a handout. That probably has been your narrative, because in your mind you felt like growing up you never had a choice. You had to get it out the mud. If your emotions went unacknowledged, or nobody ever checked on you when you were feeling sad, or when you were upset, or maybe you couldn't actually express yourself in the way that was healthy and needed and necessary, you probably became the people pleaser. You started more than likely prioritizing other people's needs and how they felt and their emotions over your own, because with you expressing your own emotions, nothing would change. Nothing would happen. You probably grew up thinking that love and feeling the act of love equaled making people happy. I have to make people happy. I can't have anybody upset with me. I can't have anybody mad at me. There can't be any conflict, because then that means there is no love there. Where there is no love, there is no peace. So you felt like, okay, let me just do what I can to make them feel good, right? And I'm not going to lie, those identities that you may have shaped, if any of those spoke to you, more than likely growing up and forging yourself into one of those identities, they probably worked for that time being. They more than likely worked. You felt safe within that. And I'm not going to lie, even me growing up, I felt safe in the fact that I could rely on myself. I felt safe in the fact that I avoided conflict, because don't nobody want to deal with that. I don't want to deal with that, so let's just keep the peace. I felt safe in that. But now, if you're resonating with this at all, more than likely that identity that you forged yourself into, it's exhausting now. And that's one of the things that I had to realize. It is exhausting to be the independent one, the strong one. It is exhausting to be a people pleaser, to always have to care about other people's emotions over my own. That's exhausting now. So at some point you have to ask yourself, is this really who I am, or is this just who I had to be to make myself feel safe? And that's what we're going to get into. Because when I first started realizing that I had built my identity around being needed, it made me panic, y'all. I'm not going to lie, because it made me think like, damn, if this is how I built my identity, if this is what I built my identity in, then if I wasn't the one showing up all the time, if I wasn't the one that was always fixing something, that was always saying yes, that was always trying to be the helping hand, like, okay, I got you, who the hell am I? What do I have to offer? And I remember crying to my therapist at one point, like, I feel bad because I can't do it. I can't help them in the way that they need to. They're going to hate me. I don't want them to hate me. Like, I need to figure it out. I'd rather put myself in the hole trying to help somebody else out so that they won't feel any type of way about me. That was identity. So if I'm not that, who the hell is Jasmine? And the hardest part is letting go of an identity that kept you safe, that put you in this bubble of protection that you built brick by brick, y'all. That is the hardest part. But one of the things that I did learn is, one, you are allowed to change. You are allowed to change your narrative. You are allowed to rewrite your story. You are allowed to outgrow the version of yourself that kept you safe for that time being. You are in a different wave, on a different path of healing. And you don't have to stay stuck in survival mode anymore. You don't. If you are ready to unlearn these patterns, you may ask yourself, okay, I've identified the fact that I placed this narrative on my life growing up. How can I unlearn this? What can I do to stop being like this? Okay, I don't want to be a people pleaser anymore. I don't want to be the strong one anymore. I don't want to be the overachiever. I want peace. I want to breathe. What can I do to break this cycle? All right, let's get into it. What can you do, friend? First things first, stop confusing love with labor. Stop confusing what you can do for other people as the reason why they love you. There's no amount of giving, of overworking, of over pleasing that you can do to anybody to be worthy of love. Love is not placed on the value of what you can do for other people. Also, the second thing, check in with yourself before you say yes. I had to start giving myself a beat before I answered anybody. One, you do not have to automatically give anybody an answer, especially if you're unclear with yourself. I had to start checking in with myself. Jasmine, do you have the capacity to give or do what someone is asking of you? Because if you don't, then maybe you can't. Maybe you shouldn't. Are you doing this because you're able to? You have the capacity to do this? Or are you doing this because you feel obligated that you have to? Because if you don't, then that person's going to be mad at you. They're going to feel some type of way. You're going to disappoint them. They won't want to be around you anymore. They won't love you anymore. Why are you doing this? Are you able to give? Do you have anything in your glass to pour into others right now at this very moment? The third thing for me, it was the hardest for me, was I had to let people experience me outside of what I could do for them. I had to make sure I created space to cultivate these relationships that I had where we did not prioritize and only prioritized me giving. You don't have to be the fixer. You don't have to be the one that sits there and listens to everybody's problems, or this person's, their opening ear, their therapist. You don't have to be the strong one that figures it out for you. Don't have to be that person. And then also, even on top of that, sometimes people don't realize that they're even taking all the time because they're so used to you just pouring. When somebody doesn't realize the deficit of what they have been offering you versus what they've been taking from you, it can be a culture shock when you address it. And I'm not saying call anybody out, but I'm also saying that you also need to be okay with experiencing these relationships and growing these relationships strictly on the idea of interacting with these people, of building bonds, building great moments without it being like this relationship is transactional. Actually take into account all of the relationships that you have and identify the ones where you feel like you're giving everything that you have to these people, or it's always something that you have to do. And then make it a task for yourself to step outside of that role, to see what type of relationship or what y'all could be, the types of experiences that you guys could have if you were not giving, if you weren't being that person to that person. Change your role in people's lives. And I'm not saying just cut people off cold turkey, but what I'm saying is pour into yourself first. Stop abandoning yourself just to feel chosen. Anybody that you have to put in work for to feel like you get a place in their lives, that relationship is not, in my opinion, y'all, is not worth having. If being accepted means that you have to keep betraying yourself, that you have to keep putting people over you, it's not worth it. It is not worth it. You also have to ask yourself, and this is the last thing that I could advise of you. You have to ask yourself, if you weren't the strong person, the peacemaker, the fixer, the overachiever, who would you be? Who are you without those identities that you've placed on yourself? And what I just want to remind you is that you are not the identity that you've placed on yourself. You are not who you had to be. Some of us had to fit in those roles just to grow up, just to live life, to survive. Some of us had to make those roles be our quote unquote armor, right? But you are not who you had to be to survive. You are no longer that person. You are allowed to change. You should change, because some of those roles and those identities can be detrimental to the person that we are meant to be, to this beautiful soul and this woman with all these blessings and the things that God intends for her. Sometimes those roles can be detrimental to us, something that is not necessary for the next level. So you have to learn how to let them go. You have to learn how to rework them. It's not that I'm never going to be the strong one. I am strong, but me being strong should not be the sole reason or the emphasis that I place on myself when it comes to my role in other people's lives. No, me being the person that fixes everything is not something that I want as my narrative. And I know that it's scary. I don't understand how how scary that it is to unlearn something that you've always been, to tell people no, to say that I can't do it and I'm sorry, to have to see like what their reaction would be. That shit is scary. But growth is scary. Change is scary as hell. But you know what's worse? Staying stuck in an identity that no longer fits you, that is no longer who you are as an individual. So start small. Start with one less obligation. Start by saying no maybe one time. I don't care if you're tired. Say no. Start with one more boundary. Figure out what that may look like for you. What areas can you say, no, I'm not able to do this and I'm sorry. Start with one area where you can choose yourself, one decision or one circumstance where you're like, you know what? I'm going to say no to this because I want to choose myself. You don't have to have an excuse why you want to say no. Just say no. You don't have to have a reason for putting up a boundary. If it's draining you, try it. Because honestly, if you built this version of yourself, you can build another one. You can build the best version. You can build an identity that promotes healing and growth and change, that promotes healthy living, that promotes healthy relationships. I believe that you can do that. I know you can do it because I'm trying. I'm doing it. All right, you guys, this was a pretty short episode this time. I really wanted to speak on this because honestly, I know all about how hard it can be to learn how to change something that's so deeply embedded into you. So if this spoke to you at all, send it to somebody who needs it. Shout out her Revision podcast. Thank you for all of the new listeners. I really appreciate you. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you're watching me on YouTube. Don't forget to review, rate the podcast, guys. 5 stars helps so much. Y'all don't understand. Just scroll down. Click on the rate, the 5 stars, and I'll be a happy camper. Don't forget, I have now created a Substack where I am bringing the newsletter to. Go ahead and click on the link in the episode description and you'll be able to see the Substack. Subscribe. You can receive a weekly newsletter. I drop gems on there. My Substack is called Rewritten Thoughts, where I definitely give a deeper dive into my thoughts and I rethink some of the narratives that we've placed on ourselves, but just in a more diary style way, because y'all, I be in my head about a lot and sometimes I can't do a whole episode. I can just write. So go ahead and if you're into that sort of thing, subscribe to my Substack. Anyways, until next time, bye.